The muffled drip of water echoed off the concrete walls, each drop ringing like a countdown in the eerie silence. Jafar blinked, straining his eyes against the darkness. The pungent smell of mildew mixed with rusting metal filled the air, clinging to the back of his throat as he struggled to recall how he ended up in this dilapidated warehouse in Goa. His last clear memory was far from here, in the familiar territories of Kerala where everything had started. It had all begun with what local authorities hastily labeled a suicide, a young woman, barely out of her teenage years, found hanging in her small room. But Jafar's instincts, honed by years of service, screamed otherwise. Something about the scene didn't add up. The position of the body, the absence of a note, the unmistakable signs of struggle masked by a poorly conceived staging. As the new head of homicide, he wasn't one to let go easily. His colleagues at the station warned him to let it be, but Jafar was driven by a confluence of emotions, professional duty, a sense of justice, and something deeper, more visceral, perhaps an echo of his own daughter's innocence. His first clue came from the victim's diary, found hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her room. Written in anxious scribbles, it spoke of men who lurked in the shadows, observing her every move. The diary hinted at a larger, more sinister network, but stopped short of naming names. In it, he found a sequence of numbers, coordinates, he suspected, and a recurrent mention of the name Neha. Wasting no time, Jafar delved deeper. The coordinates led him to a bustling port near Cochin. Undercover, he began tracing the dark alleys at night, the whispers of desperation interwoven with the city's historic charm. Here, among the containers and shipping crates, he first learned of the Network, a notorious web of sex traffickers stretching across states, from the dense jungles of Assam to the crowded streets of Mumbai, and now, apparently, to Goa. But it was the chance encounter with Anjali, a street vendor who caught Jafar's sharp eyes with her shifty demeanor, that cracked the case open. Under the guise of selling flowers, Anjali was a scout for the network, identifying potential victims for weeks before they vanished without a trace. "They're not just here," she whispered to him one rainy evening. "They've got eyes everywhere, rich clients, powerful backers. You're in over your head, sir." Anjali would later provide the chilling details. The network's Goa base, masquerading as a legitimate import-export business, was commanded by a shadowy figure known only as Vikram. Few had seen him. Fewer still lived to tell of the encounter. As Jafar pieced together the puzzle, the story took him deeper into peril. He traversed across states, accruing more bleak fragments of this horrific landscape. In Kolkata, he discovered a ledger encrypted with an odd code of numbers and dates, entries suspiciously correlating with missing persons reports. In Hyderabad, an old informant revealed a stained map, crisscrossed with red lines indicating trafficking routes. And all roads seemed to lead him back to Goa, to this very warehouse. Suspicious that his every step was being watched, Jafar sent much of his evidence back home, keeping only the essentials. When he arrived in Goa, he knew he was stepping directly into the lion's den. Back in the dim warehouse, trying to shake off a wave of dizziness, Jafar felt for his ankle, finding the uncomfortable truth, handcuffed. He heard the scrape of a door opening, a shaft of dim light penetrating the murky gloom, and the sound of footsteps approaching, deliberate, confident. A tall, lean man came into view, barely more than a silhouette against the sparse light. "Welcome, Inspector," he purred, a thin smirk stretching across his gaunt face. "I've been expecting you." Jafar's heart pounded. It was Vikram. Everything, the missing girl, the too quiet whispers, the masked threats culminated into this moment. He steadied his breath, forcing his voice into cold steel. "If you think you can silence me, Vikram, you're sorely mistaken. The world already knows. There's no running now." But Vikram's smirk only deepened, his eyes glinting with malevolence. He snapped his fingers, and two brutish men emerged from the shadows, dragging a terrified young girl between them, her eyes wide with fear, her body trembling. "Neha, see, Inspector," Vikram said softly, his voice laced with venom. "You've overestimated your own reach. But don't worry, your little chase won't go to waste. You'll be the perfect warning to anyone else who gets too curious." Jafar's mind raced through possible escapes, any gambit to save the girl and himself, but he found none. Bound and outnumbered, desperation clawed at his resolve. He heard his own voice, somewhere distant, screaming the girl's name, and watched as Neha was cruelly ripped from her world, much like the victim who had set him on this path. With grim finality, Vikram tilted his head. "Goodbye, Inspector." The room plunged back into darkness as a heavy blow sent Jafar reeling into unconsciousness. His final thought was not of his impending demise, but of the thousands of girls who still remained captive in unseen chains, waiting, praying, fearing. News of Jafar's death swept through Kerala, shrouded in deceit as another accidental death. But among the ashes of his silenced pursuit, whispers rose, igniting a spark in the hearts of those still standing. His colleagues, realizing the depth of what he had uncovered, began their own quiet investigations, determined to finish what Jafar had started. Somewhere in the echoing silence of a distant alley, a girl cried out in her dreams, unaware that justice, though wounded, was still pursuing her captors, one brave step at a time.